Rich Dad Poor Dad. Introduction. Aiden's two mentors. Aiden was a 12-year-old boy living in a quiet town. He loved exploring and asking questions. His father, Mr. Brown, was a schoolteacher who believed in hard work and saving money. Aiden admired his dad, but often wondered why they couldn't afford extra treats or family vacations. One summer, Aiden began spending time with his best friend Liam's father, Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray, a businessman, was different. He didn't work regular hours, yet he seemed to have more time and money. He often talked about opportunities, investments, and how to grow wealth. Aiden began noticing the difference between the two dads. Mr. Brown worked hard for his salary and always said, "We can't afford this." Meanwhile, Mr. Gray would say, "How can we afford this?" Aiden's curiosity grew. The first lesson, money works for you. One afternoon, Aiden asked Mr. Gray, "Why does my dad work so hard, but we still have to say no to many things? You don't work as much, but you always seem relaxed." Mr. Gray smiled. "Aiden, it's because I've learned how to make money work for me. Your dad works hard for money, but I invest money so it can grow." "Invest?" Aiden asked, confused. "Yes," said Mr. Gray. "Let me show you." He took Aiden to a nearby store he owned. "This shop earns money every day. Even when I'm sleeping, people buy things here, and I get paid. That's what I mean by making money work for me. Your dad works for a salary, but I invest in things like this shop, which brings me money." Aiden was amazed. "So you don't have to work all the time?" "Exactly," Mr. Gray said, "but it took me time to learn. If you want to grow rich, you must understand how money works." Lesson 2. Assets versus liabilities. The next day, Mr. Gray gave Aiden a simple challenge. He handed him 2 jars. One jar is for assets, and the other is for liabilities. He said, "Can you tell me what those mean?" Aiden shook his head. "An asset is something that puts money in your pocket," Mr. Gray explained. "A liability takes money out of your pocket. For example, if you buy a bike to ride for fun, it's a liability because it costs money. But if you rent the bike to others, it becomes an asset because it makes money for you." Aiden thought about it. "So if I buy a game and play it, it's a liability. But if I sell games to others, it's an asset?" "Exactly," said Mr. Gray. "If you want to grow rich, focus on buying assets." That night, Aiden shared what he learned with his dad. "Why don't we buy assets, Dad?" Mr. Brown smiled. "That's a good idea, Aiden, but it takes money to buy assets, and we don't have extra." Lesson 3. Financial education. The next week, Mr. Gray gave Aiden a small notebook. "This is your financial diary. Write down every penny you earn or spend." Aiden started keeping track of his allowance, snacks, and small chores he did for neighbors. Soon, he realized he spent most of his money on candies and toys. "I don't save anything," Aiden admitted. "That's okay," Mr. Gray said. "The first step is knowing where your money goes. Now let's set a goal. What do you want to buy?" Aiden thought for a moment. "A new skateboard." "Great," said Mr. Gray. "Instead of saving for it, let's think of a way to earn money and make it an asset." Aiden came up with an idea. He could clean neighbors' yards for a small fee. He worked hard for a month and saved enough to buy the skateboard, but he didn't stop there. He rented his skateboard to other kids in the park for $1 an hour. Soon, Aiden was earning more money than he had ever imagined. The final lesson, think big. One day, Aiden asked Mr. Gray, "Why don't all dads think like you?" Mr. Gray laughed. "Because most people are afraid to take risks. They want security, so they stick to a job. But if you're brave enough to invest in yourself and take small risks, you can grow rich." "But what if I fail?" Aiden asked. Failure is a part of learning, Mr. Gray said. Even I failed many times. The important thing is to keep trying and never stop learning. Aiden's new path. Over time, Aiden began thinking like Mr. Gray. He started small businesses, saved money, and focused on buying assets. He also helped his dad understand the difference between assets and liabilities. Years later, Aiden grew up to be a successful entrepreneur. He often remembered the lessons from his rich dad, Mr. Gray, and passed them on to others.